I'm gonna start this off in an unusual way, I think, by talking about the date. It's Monday, the 28th of September, and it is 20 to 5 in the afternoon. Very rarely would somebody with a marketing background date something quite so specifically, and usually the aim of content is to make it last. However, things are changing so fast that I think it's relevant that we talk about this in real time. That's the date, this is the time. With a little bit of luck, by the time this is out in the world on Wednesday, the most destructive thing I think to have happened to hospitality, certainly in my lifetime, and I think in most people's experience, will have gone away. But we don't know whether or not it will. I'm talking about the 10 o'clock curfew, which obviously that wasn't going to be the plan for this conversation, but it arrived last week. It's here now. Hopefully it'll be gone soon. And I think we can all kind of get behind hospitality and say that it's complete nonsense. The government sage came out and said that who goes to a restaurant anyway at 10 p.m. So with that, I'm going to introduce my panel, or they're going to introduce themselves. We've got Andrew Strugnell from Arc Inspirations, Felicity Tulloch from Kuits, and Abi Dunn from 68 People. If you could just give us a bit of an idea what you do, and we'll go from there. Andrew, do you want to go first?
Yes, so I'm Andrew Strugnell. I am head of sales for Arc Inspirations. So we manage 17 venues across the north of England. Many venues did open till 3 a.m. in the morning, with a lot of our trade starting at 10 p.m. at
night. Well, Felicity, do you want to go next?
Yeah, hi. My name's Felicity, and I head up the leisure team at Kuits Solicitors. So we act on behalf of a whole range of hospitality venues up and down the country, but we're based in Manchester. And so we've got sort of particular expertise amongst those operators who live and work here in the Northwest. And over the last few months, we've seen huge changes and huge challenges to the sector. And at the moment, it looks like it's going to get worse before it gets better.
Abi?
Hi, I'm Abi. I'm from a company called 68 People, and we support many clients across Manchester and across the UK find their talent. And a lot of that talent at the moment is going the wrong way out of businesses, very sadly. And we're on the front line of talking to, I say, hundreds of people a week who are sending in messages to us about redundancy and about their current situation. So, yeah, hopefully I can offer that kind of people side of the panel and where I feel people are at the moment and how they're feeling.
Thank you. Again, I think it might be, my first point was just to say sort of like, what does the curfew actually mean in real time? One of the most kind of, I've spent my life in this industry, and even I can't quite work out how this is, how this is it's impacting everybody so differently. But I saw Murray from Liverpool tweeted late last week saying, this means to us X number of hours and X number of jobs. They put it in a really stark, real terms, which our government don't seem to have bothered to even look at doing. Andrew, you said that a lot of your sites don't even open or don't start trading properly till later on in the evening. So what does this mean for you guys? What can you do? And you need to unmute yourself.
Yeah. Yes, so yeah, we have 3 different concepts, all offering a very different offering. And Manhattan is our late night bar. We are full, luckily, in the daytime. We have a fantastic food-led side of the business. I mean, even before the 10 p.m. curfew, we saw, we made the best of a bad situation, but obviously being liquor led after 10 p.m. without shoulder to shoulder drinking, it's a tough sell. With a lot of empty space where we would like to have social groups of people dancing, drinking, mingling off their seats. So, to run at a 50% capacity before this 10 p.m. curfew, to then lose, in some venues, we're losing 5 hours of trade on Saturday night, where, we're not hitting capacity before we were at full capacity until like 10:30 at night. So just as people are kind of getting going, enjoying the night, they finish their meals, they want to come out and have a bit of party, relax, let their hair down, that's kind of been taken away from them. So it's very, very tough for us after the first weekend.
So we briefly discussed this before we came onto the recording, but Felicity, dispersal orders, how a bit in terms of the licensing side of this now, it was something that we had to do, and the government has essentially gone back around to what was there, in that they asked you to write licenses so that it didn't happen. Am I right?
Yeah, the licensing laws changed in 2005, and one of the driving reasons behind that was to get away from the traditional pub kick-out time of 11:20. Because you had two sorts of licenses back then: justices' licenses for pubs and public entertainment licenses for later night venues. And so there were pinch points at around 11:30 and again at about 2:00, which caused fights, queues at taxi ranks, queues for takeaways and that sort of thing. It was one of the reasons that takeaways were brought into the licensing regime, because they were considered to be that sort of pinch point and a source for conflict later on in the evening. And operators have spent years, all those intervening years, formulating dispersal policies. Licenses have been granted with consideration given to other licenses nearby and their terminal hours. Local authorities have drafted their licensing policies sometimes to make sure that there's that staggered end to an evening. And with one fell swoop, with very little, if any, evidence and not much more thought, that's all been removed. So now you have a very early terminal hour. 10 p.m. really isn't the end of anyone's night. I know, Lucy, you mentioned when we were talking before this that someone commented that who's eating a meal at 10 o'clock, but I think that just shows a complete lack of understanding of how the trade operates. Restaurants being forced to close at 10 p.m. mean that they find it really hard to get that second sitting in. It's very difficult to take a 8:30 booking, isn't it, if everyone's got to be gone by 10.
Yeah.
So I think we've gone backwards, and the inevitable has happened. The videos on social media over the weekend show huge numbers of people up and down the country, singing in the street, partying in the street.
Doing everything they're not allowed to do inside.
Exactly. Trams are packed, taxis are hugely expensive, people are queuing to get into supermarkets, and presumably, rather than going home, which might have been the intention, people are probably going to other people's homes, and having what was a very regulated experience in a pub or a bar is now causing people to have house parties which are totally unregulated. And so personally for me, I think it was the wrong decision, and I don't think it's going to have the outcome that some might have thought it will. I fear that it'll have the opposite outcome. Figures won't decrease, they probably won't even stabilise, and then I worry that the hospitality sector might be targeted for more draconian measures, and they might be blamed for the crowds on the street, and we might find ourselves in some sort of total shutdown for a period of time.
So, Abi, you mentioned before that you're seeing talent almost bleeding out of businesses at the moment and out into the kind of the open market, if you like, that is currently not really accepting any sort of new roles. What do you see as the future for these people? Do are you able to place them anywhere else? Are you able to support them? Abi's background is operational. Abi comes from a background in at Revolution, which gives us such insight, I think, as a recruiter these days. But it would be great to understand your plan, if there is one.
Well, I mean, certainly linking it to the curfew, I think what I have seen is, and I haven't got data to prove this yet, but suddenly this week that trajectory of people saying, look, I am going to be made redundant. I know now. I think we didn't understand the extension. Was there going to be an extension of the furlough? Was there going to be any sector-specific support? That's clear now that there isn't. So people are now, we've seen people who have been potentially dead men walking, for want of a better term, since March, and now, now being told that's, we're going to have to let you go, and that's the heartbreaking part of it. I think linking it to the curfew, I think all that's done. We started to see. We had, as recruiters, a really strong month actually in September, and that followed on from the confidence bill in August, and now that has dropped off again. It's very similar to what we've experienced in March, where it's the unknown. It's people saying we can't have confidence. We don't know how this. We can. It's easy to measure what we lose between 10 and 3 or 10. We've got the data to show exactly what revenue we will lose, but what's immeasurable is that customer confidence of, does that affect lunchtime, does that affect breakfast, and so we're in this kind of limbo, which everybody will be. But I think, to err on the side of caution, if you've had people on furlough, they will now all very sadly be let go at the end of October when those the new scheme I don't think cuts it in the slightest for hospitality. Why would anybody with declining sales or with questionable sales continue to support 50% of salary? That they're not going to do that, and that's when Felicity said this is possibly going to get worse before it gets better. That's we are bracing ourselves for those 900,000 people being out of work. Sorry, I did, in answer to your actual question of the can people go to other sectors? Of course, and that's the kind of conversations that we're having, that this next step for many people will be out of the sector, and you kind of have to buckle up and take those opportunities and see what happens to you for the next year, 18 months, and maybe not accept that you've moved out of hospitality, but this is a temporary situation and hospitality will come back. And I think that from what I know of people in hospitality, I think maybe now is the time to sell those competencies, behaviours to other sectors. We are innovative, resilient, hardworking, entirely intelligent, very positive people. And I know it's not the done thing to talk about how hard people work anymore, but I imagine we've got to be one of the hardest working sectors there is. And you transfer that into other sectors, and I think people will be blown away by the talent that they could get into their sector all of a sudden, if they can open their minds up and see that some of those things.
Yeah.
That's a long answer. Sorry.
I'm really conscious that no, that's the answer, isn't it? I'm really conscious that the audience that we're talking to here is probably not a hospitality audience, and I think we've got possibly a bit of an opportunity to talk to Katie and Ilona's network, who are, we're talking to lawyers and we're talking to professional services, and we're talking to a lot of people who probably have never worked in hospitality, or not for a long time, and maybe don't understand the economics of how this industry works. And I really want to kind of, if we can, maybe get a few ideas out to those industries as to maybe what you can do to help. I know, for one, that a large amount of the restaurant kind of the way a restaurant's P&L works is lunch. Lunch is a big thing that's missing at the moment. Business lunches. I know Pret have taken a kick in the press recently, but it's true. These people in town having meetings, having lunches, it's vital. So that's one thing. But Andrew, can you offer any insight? I'm sure you've got some strategies, or you basically.
Yes, it's interesting. The lunch trade, it's slipped away. It's because of our locations in Manchester, especially. We've got Banyan, we're in the centre of Spinningfields, which is very much the corporate, finance sector of the city. And with everyone working from home, you don't get the footfall you normally would. With the offices closed, and some of the offices talking about reopening not until April next year. It's very, very hard for us to, look at that bit. To generate more, we've got ideas. We've just looked at opening times to kind of combat the curfew effectively. So, to start the day earlier, so especially on weekends, we're introducing bottomless brunch from 10 a.m. and hopefully generating a new crowd and changing people's mindsets. But I mean, that's a very small solution to the curfew. It's the football, everyone working at home. People still need that team spirit. I think if there's a way of getting those people together, people want to interact. People like going to the offices, to see their colleagues, to work as part of a team. And sometimes Zoom and isn't enough. And there's a bigger issue there. Some may say mental health, the social interaction, which I think we can offer a big thing too. Getting them back in, social distance, lunch, meetings if we can, and get them out.
It's fair to say as well, restaurants are one of the most regulated industries when it comes to health and safety. You see the EHO on a regular basis. There's very few places that are as relentlessly examined as the hospitality industry when it comes to cleanliness. I
mean, we were regulated before COVID, and
exactly.
to reopen on the 4th of July with guidelines 84 pages long from the government of you have to tick every single box before you can open your doors. We will check you, do a risk assessment of your venue. We've done it, we've measured out, we've spent a fortune to get COVID secure and reopen our doors on the 4th of July to make sure we're a safe social environment for people to come and enjoy them. And it seems to, like I say, move backwards.
Felicity, are you hearing from your clients? Are they asking you questions? Are they coming to you with ideas? Are you being able to advise people on? Is there anything that is doable?
Is there anything that they can do? It's just such a shame because having weathered the lockdown storm and then reopening on the 4th of July, like Andrew says, with so many restrictions and reduced capacities, but they still managed to do it because the industry is so entrepreneurial and innovative. People were coming up with new ideas all of the time. The Eat Out to Help Out scheme was widely considered, I think, a roaring success. And just as things were sort of getting busier, Abi mentioned that she was getting busier. We certainly were. Clients were really looking to the future. Perhaps sites that they were sites that perhaps had been mothballed earlier on in the year were coming back on stream, and it was all really looking very positive. And now things are going off again, and things are being delayed again. I think the consumer confidence has gone, but then operator confidence has gone. We've had clients on the phone today saying that, with rumours of a possible 2-week lockdown on the horizon, they don't want to commit to festive events or those sorts of things. So it's very difficult. Lots of people, like Andrew says, are looking at brunch, trying to make the most of the hours that they do have under their licence and bring things forward rather than push them later on. But often I think that's a way to lose less money rather than make more. It's the way of survival, and I think it's as black and white as that at the moment. I'm not sure how long lots of operators are going to be able to stand this and to bear it, to be honest.
It just I really hope that by the time this goes out on Wednesday that the curfew has been lifted and this is essentially an academic exercise in a discussion
Yeah, I really hope it is. It's the knock-on effect of everything, isn't it? The curfew might stop people drinking in pubs after 10 p.m, but what does that do to the takeaway owner? What does it do to the taxi driver? And then if you haven't, to go back to the original point, talking about people, workers in city centres, it's a whole ecosystem that's totally linked. And if you take workers out of the city, putting the curfew to one side for a minute, you haven't got those lunchtime meals, you haven't got those after work pints, and now with the curfew, you haven't got those late night drinks either.
Well, it's the same as what you said about how local authorities, you don't get your license in isolation. You get your license linked to the people around you and the residents that live near you and the businesses that operate close to you. And it's almost, we know that a city is an ecosystem in whichever way you look at it, but the licensed activity in a city is a delicate ecosystem managed by, and I know people give licensing a lot of stick, but managed by people who are very good at what they do. They keep us safe, they keep us, they make the environment, they sort the police, the transport, it's all linked. It doesn't exist in isolation, sorry to use that word, but it doesn't live in isolation. And all of a sudden it does, doesn't it? All of a sudden it's just flat 10 p.m, everyone go home. Well, actually, no, they're not going home, they're all out in the street. So it's a really difficult one, isn't it? I suppose if you could say, Abi, one thing to perhaps, the head of people for some big old law firm in Manchester, what would you say?
Oh, well, I mean, what I think hospitality people need, one of the most important things that they can do, and it doesn't answer your question, but I think it might help people within the sector, I'll come back to your one, is that they need to really consider their audience now when they're writing a CV. So if somebody is from a law firm, if somebody is, they're applying for administrative roles, you need to highlight those things and, consider for a second that if somebody doesn't know the site that you've worked in, doesn't know that that's a multi-million-pound operation, doesn't know that you've done accounting as part of your management role, then really highlighting those things. But also, in answer to your question, to what would I say to people who are from different sectors, these guys, and especially at manager level, if you're managing a site, or you're an events manager, the kind of skills that you have are so well-rounded. You can do anything. And this is the interestingly enough, when I was in house for a company, we'd tested 60 general managers psychometrically, and we presumed that their behaviours would be very similar. So we presumed, for example, that they would have a very high influence factor because it was in hospitality and it was working in people. And actually, the results that we found was there wasn't a behavioural correlation actually at all between 60 managers, but what there was a super intelligence level. So these managers were highly intellectual and they were managing these multi-million-pound businesses, and so therefore they can turn on their feet and go and do anything. You could give them anything to do because they're so, their IQs are so high, they could do it. And so what I'd say is don't underestimate the hospitality people that you're coming across, because I think you'll be very, very impressed.
I think actually that is a really nice point to wrap up. Don't underestimate hospitality people. As an industry, it's pivoted and pivoted and pivoted till the word pivot has run out of meaning, and then do you know what? They'll pivot again because they need to. Again, like Abi says, hugely intelligent people capable of digesting 84-page documents that come out at 10 p.m. at night, and you open up at 9 o'clock the next morning and you're expected to have that ready, or you lose a day's trade. And the reality of a day's trade, yes, the business loses a day's trade, but you lose a member of staff who is paid hourly, so they lose 9 hours wage, which might be actually the last 9 hours wage towards paying that month's rent. So I think there's a real human cost coming out at the end of this. Again, all I can say is that I really hope that by the time this comes out, it's out of date. Which I think we've had a really interesting discussion, and it would still, I think one of the most important things we can do is keep explaining to people who don't come from a hospitality background just how it works. They're not money making machines. Restaurants are not. It's not an easy way to make a profit. But the people who do it because they absolutely love it. Everybody, I don't know many people who don't like going out for a drink or for a meal or for a glass of wine. I think everybody misses it. And just if you can support those people that you liked before, that pub around the corner, they will have cleaned the toilets, I promise. So thanks for joining the panel today. I'm going to let Katie wrap up because I think she's got something else to say.
Yes, lovely, thank you. And thank you so much to the panel. Such an interesting discussion and so many things to sort of take away. I think the key one, we know the curfew, it's just going to continue to cripple the sector, and something has to be done. And I think you know, we need to do everything that we can to get our voices behind some change and, you know, make some noise around that really. And I think, you know, at a more sort of immediate level, I think maybe, you know, people need to be sort of taking some strides to returning to, you know, the city centres, to spend a day, you know, in, you know, your local kind of city centre and visit those hospitality venues and you know, experience that, and like Andrew said, for the sort of not only the economical impact but also the sort of mental health and well-being aspect, because, you know, we've really enjoyed kind of returning and meeting people, and, you know, you can't underestimate the value of that. And as Abi said, I think, you know, recognising the skills of, you know, hospitality staff, it applies in every sector, whether you recognise that or not. You know, you can't underestimate those skills that are required by working with the public, because it
should be like national service. Everybody should have to do it.
They should.
Everybody should. 6 months working something roughly like Manor Hatter or Albert Schloss. You would never ever be rude to a bartender ever again, ever.
Absolutely. I just wanted to mention quickly, we've got sort of word this afternoon about Career Scope, which is a bit of a collection of organisations that are coming together to create a bit of a hub. So it's Springboard, Hospitality Action, Institute of Hospitality and the Savoy Educational Trust. They've got an online hub which is careerscope.uk.net, which can help people from employment advice to CV writing. So anybody that's having a tough time, there is some resources out there to go and look at. And yeah, just a final thank you to everybody. Thank you to Lucy, thank you to Andrew, Felicity and Abi.